This is Bob DeRosa, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web. My name's Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 63. Well, today I'm so excited to bring you an interview with television and feature writer Bob DeRosa. Now, Bob, you may know from the recent movie Killers and also from White Collar on USA. We're going to get to his bio in just a second. I want to mention a big milestone for the TV Writer Podcast, and that is that the TV Writer Twitter database has now hit 960 writers. As we know, advancing in this industry is a lot about who you know. And so one great way to do that, to get to know people, is to connect with them on Twitter. 960 writers, great resource. You can find that at tvwriterpodcast.com. You'll find lots of other resources like links to massive databases of free scripts. And also, I do want to mention, if you want to donate to support the podcast and to my upcoming LA move, there's a link there to do that. And there are great rewards available, including advertising on the podcast, consulting, and lots more. Do check that out at tvwriterpodcast.com. Now, the bio on Bob DeRosa. Where Bob DeRosa comes from, nice guys finish first. The Florida-born screenwriter recently finished his first season as a writer on the hit USA show White Collar. He previously wrote Lionsgate's action comedy Killers, starring Ashton Kutcher and Katherine Heigl, and co-wrote director Jiho Lee's crime drama The Air I Breathe. After graduating from the University of Florida, Bob returned home to Orlando and became a leading figure in the city's thriving theater and film community. In addition to co-founding the award-winning comedy troupe Them, Bob spent 3 years programming for the Florida Film Festival. After relocating to Los Angeles, Bob wrote 2 evenings of one-act plays and is a regular contributor to the ongoing late-night series Serial Killers at Sacred Fools Theater in Hollywood. When he's not writing, Bob studies Kenpo karate and spends time with his lady Jen and their 3 kids who look suspiciously like cats. In today's interview, Bob is going to debunk some myths. Get ready. Here we go. This is Gray, and I'm here with TV and feature writer Bob DeRosa. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing good, Gray. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks. And I think this is going to be really, really cool. We've been, for the first 60 episodes of the podcast, it's been a lot about people's life stories. But what I've been trying to get to now is talking about topics and concepts of writing. And you mentioned a few in an email to me that I think are going to be a big hit, and I can't wait to get to those. But first of all, we do want to establish who you are. You grew up in Florida. When did you know that you wanted to write?
I mean, I've been writing my entire life. I wrote my first short story when I was 6 years old. So I was always the kid that was writing, like everybody in school knew me as that. It wasn't until high school that I tried to write a novel, and I was like, I'm bored describing everything. I just want to get to the action and to the dialogue, and that's kind of where it clicked, where I'm like, oh, maybe I want to write movies. And so it was I had an inkling of it in high school. It wasn't really till I got to college and I started making short films and started writing scripts and basically doing everything but care about my major, that I realized, you know what, I think this is my path, for better and for worse.
Mm-hmm. Now, you did some comedy as well around that time. How did that come about?
Well, I mean, after college, I went to the University of Florida. I grew up in Orlando, and then University of Florida, then right back to Orlando. And we had this moment in time when we thought we were going to be Hollywood East, and that's what everybody marketed the town as. So everyone was real excited. And then you get back, and then you realize that it was a myth. I mean, there was production happening, but it was a lot of, projects coming in, shooting, and then leaving. So there wasn't, a lot of ways to kind of break in as a writer there. So it was just a matter of just kind of taking advantage of what the city had to offer. And I came up in this amazing moment in time in Orlando where it was just, fantastic improv, an incredible Fringe Festival, which is, big international theater festival. You had probably the best, Southeastern Film Festival, and the Florida Film Festival was right there at the MGM Theater. And you kind of had access to all that. So literally, I started doing improv at SAC, and the SAC Comedy Lab, which is where Wayne Brady got his start, and Jonathan Mangum, and a bunch of those guys. And then, that's where I got my start, and then me and a bunch of guys broke off and formed our own troupe called THEM, THEM.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing, we became super successful in town. We toured the Canadian Fringe circuit. We did a show with Kevin Nealon back in the day. It was like one of those things where it was like I was doing improv with them, and I was a programmer for the Florida Film Festival. I was writing and directing theater at this acting school called Art Shake, which is still there. I'm still doing amazing work. And it was just one of those cities where you could kind of put your hand, dip your toe into everything. So I was essentially a jack of all trades. I was literally voted Renaissance Man by the Orlando Weekly at one point, just because I was literally involved in pretty much just about every sort of artistic endeavor you could be involved in. At the same time, I'm writing and directing short films with my friends, and I was writing screenplays. That was like the last on my list, was writing screenplays. So I would be writing, feature scripts from like midnight till 4 a.m. And it was one of those where I kind of had that moment, that epiphany, where it's like, oh, I've done everything I can do here. And so it was a moment of like, I think, it's time to go. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, it was about taking stock of all those different interests, all those things that I love to do, and going, well, what's my priority? Why am I moving here? And I just had that moment. I was like, I'm here to write scripts. I'll do some improv on the side with my friends, but I'm here to be a screenwriter. And I think moving to Los Angeles and laying down the law that way with myself was one of the best moves I ever did.
Mm-hmm. And so The Air I Breathe was around that time. Was that the first big thing?
That was my first producer credit. Yeah, I mean, it was the first big thing. I'd already been working. About a year after I moved to Los Angeles, I got my first studio job. I sold a pitch to Revolution Studios, which I don't think really exists anymore. But that, Todd Gardner used to be president of production over there. Now he's, a huge producer and does big movies. And I think Here Comes the Boom is his new movie that's coming out soon. But so Todd Gardner and his exec Naveed Makarhaji, and Naveed's at the company Film Engine right now. And Naveed's a huge exec and producer. So those two guys gave me my first job in Hollywood. But I was writing studio jobs, but none of them were really moving forward. And at the same time, Jiho Lee, who was a director I met at the Florida Film Festival way back in the day, when I moved to Los Angeles, he came to me and said, "Hey, I want to do my debut feature," and he had this idea for 4 intertwining stories based on this old Chinese myth. And so he came to me with this, and at first he wanted to shoot it in Korea, and we worked on it for a while, and then eventually decided to set it in the West, and we spent 2 years on it, and that's the script that became The Air I Breathe.
Very cool. And so when that came out, did that really change things for you, or was it still just as much work? And tell me how you got from that to Killers.
What happened was I was one of those guys who, when I first started, I think most writers are this way. Your manager, who you trust and is a smart person, says, "Hey, we need to figure out how to brand you, how to put you in a box." And most writers, their first instinct is to go, "No, I want to write everything because I'm a multifaceted person." So I had literally like a little romantic dramedy. I had an across-time zombie killing movie. I had all these samples, and nobody knew. I had fans. People loved what I did, but nobody knew quite what to do with me. And so then The Air I Breathe happened, and Air I Breathe was like that sort of movie, multiple genres, big ensemble. It was, very much an independent film, but people loved the script, and they, Gio's a fantastic director, so, they were really excited about, the film itself. But like Gio was editing Air I Breathe, and I was like, "Hey, I'm available now. I should go back to work." And I couldn't use Air I Breathe as my sample because I'd co-written it with Gio. And that was just one of the things about the business that I learned. I was like, oh, crap. So my best script was like several years old, and people had already read it. So like I had no new sample. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have this, this film in post with this amazing cast and this visionary director, and I can't work. And it just made me really mad. So I sat down and I was just like, I'm going to take everything I love about writing, everything I love to see in movies, I'm going to put it all into one movie. And it was kind of like I had a chip on my shoulder, I had something to prove. And so I'm like, what am I about? I was just like, I want to do high concept action that's character driven, that's, romantic but not a big love story. It's funny but not an outright comedy. And, meaningful and emotional. And I put all that stuff into one story. And that's the spec script I wrote called 5 Killers. And that's the script that changed my life. And it, went through development and became the movie Killers. But literally from the moment I sat down in my little Burbank apartment and started writing till it was on, 3,000 screens or 2,500 screens or whatever, it was about a 4-year journey, which is not that long, really.
Oh, for features, that's pretty short.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, Killers must have opened some doors.
It did, yeah. It did. It was very interesting because it did open doors right at the time that everybody decided they weren't really going to make anything or buy anything. So the film came out in 2010. The crash happened, around 2009? The economic crash I'm speaking of. So basically 2010 was about the worst time in the world to try and sell something. So there was the economic crash. We had the ramifications of the writer's strike, were just all these things that happened where the studio started just contracting. So I wrote another spec, which I went out with, and people really liked the writing, but it was more of an ensemble as opposed to a star-driven vehicle, so nobody bought it. And then, I took out a couple of pitches, and nobody was buying anything. And it was just a really dark, desolate for screenwriting. So it was such an interesting moment because I had a great deal in place. I got to buy a house. I had the most success I've ever seen in the industry, and then I had all these doors, tons of meetings, tons of new fans, and I didn't capitalize on that. I didn't do the work. It's just I didn't break through in that moment into a meaningful next project, and it was a bummer, but it was also just a really difficult time for everybody. I was at some screenwriting panel, and I met a guy who'd written he sold a check for $3 million. And he was like, yeah, I haven't worked in a year and a half. Wow. And I was like, are you kidding me? It was a really difficult time. And I think it goes to show that, things are better now. They're still not making as many movies as they used to, but they're buying more scripts. Studios are developing more things. There's definitely more energy around, town. And it's just a matter of the lesson, I think, in perseverance. It's a lesson in kind of understanding that this business is cyclical. And sometimes it's a rough moment, and you kind of have to wait it out, and you have to keep doing the work. But timing is a huge part of this industry. So I learned some big lessons there in the moments after Killers.
And so was that when you thought about working in TV? And how did the white collar thing happen?
Well, what happened was it was right around, I think, before even Killers came out. I'd been a fan of TV for a while. I've been thinking about TV. I kind of knew that that's something I wanted to try, and it was just a moment of when's the right time? So right before Killers, I took some meetings and ended up pitching a show around town, and then I think right after Killers, I pitched another show. And basically, I went through 2 pitch seasons where I was pitching a show and pitching different shows, and people loved my ideas. They loved me in the room. There was just something about my pitch that wasn't connecting, that wasn't selling, and so it was one of those where I kind of had a moment of, just a moment of truth myself last year, where I was like, I need to figure out what's missing in this puzzle. And so I'm like, well, how about I write a pilot? Because I've never done that, a spec pilot. Never written a spec pilot. I should do that, A, so that the first time I get paid to write a pilot, I'm not, it's not my first time, and B, it's just a good practice. I hope to understand, the structure better. And so I've been working on this idea for a robot movie, and my manager at the time was like, hey, here's take a robot, and and he basically pitched me an idea of how to, of a TV show, a robot talk show. And at the same time, I've been studying, about nanobots, and I've been studying about corporations, and kind of put together this vision of how the show was going to work. And it kind of clicked for me. I wrote it in 2 weeks. Wow. I boarded it in a week. I wrote my first draft in a week. And I got a really good response. And unfortunately, my manager and I had been together for 10 years. We'd come up together. Right after I wrote that, we parted ways.
Oh no!
So the person who'd kind of been on my side the whole time, we just all of a sudden it's just I have my agents who are outstanding. I'm with Verve, and Adam Levine signed me back when it was in Endeavor, and he's been my guy, my champion for several years now. And his one of the agents they just promoted, Zach Carlisle, is fantastic. And they're all big fans of my pilot, and they just they were just like, hey, just expose it to the town and see what happens. And so I ended up getting, I use this word fans a lot, and I ended up getting a fan at Fox Television Studios. And so Matt Lowe's had read it and really liked it, and I had taken a few meetings on it, but like Matt was really passionate about it, and Matt had also, like, his company had just bought a similar themed show. They just bought some sort of robot show. They basically made it impossible to also buy mine. So he's like, oh, I love it. We can't buy it. Come on in. We'll meet. And so I did the general meeting where we sit there and we see if we like each other. And we hung out for quite a while. We hit it off. And it was, anytime before you go into a meeting, you see what shows they've made. And it was like, and I was literally a white collar fan from the first episode. My lady and I have seen the entire run of the show. And so it was one of those moments where I could be totally truthful and honest and go, hey, I'm a huge white collar fan. And he's like, wow, so am I. And so we talked about the show for a while, and it was definitely the show that fit like my tone, the way I write. You could see in my pilot, oh yeah, you'd be a good fit for that show. And he's like, well, I'll try and show it to Jeff Easton, who's the creator of White Collar and executive producer. And I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, people say things in the room all the time. And I'm like, sure, that's not. You're actually going to say to the boss of one of your hit shows. Okay, maybe. And then 8 months later, I get the call that, like, they basically Jeff had sold another pilot to USA. They were about to go into production at the exact same time as the pilot and White Collar were going to shoot at the same time. And there was a lot of work happening all at once. And they just after 2 years of having virtually the exact same writing staff for White Collar, they were like, we think we might want to bring one more voice into the room just to help with the workload.
Wow.
And, and so I had a meeting with the number 2 over there, Mark Goffman, the co-executive producer, and we sat down for an hour, and I came back and sat down with Jeff for an hour, and like 3 days later, they gave me a call, and I got the job.
Wow. Very, very cool. Well, I think we've covered a couple of things that we're going to be talking about in the topic section, and I think this would be a good time to segue toward that. One of the things you had sent me was, you said that your story was an interesting look at personal branding. Why don't we expand on that here? What do you mean by that? You touched on it a little bit, but what do you feel that represents for you?
For me, I think it's a matter, it's learning to not hate the idea of being in a box. And I think there's a big problem with the lingo we use in this industry, like the concept of the box. Like, you need to be in a box. That imagery is confining. Like, I don't want to be stuck in a box and can't get out. And so I think the lingo is what makes things like that difficult. I think personal branding, is a little more friendly and a little more understandable in the sense that it's just like, I want people to know what they're getting, if they meet with me, if they read me, if they want to hire me, what am I bringing to the table? And I'm like, if you have, an ensemble medical show, I'm not your guy, because that's just not what I do. Most importantly, it's not what I like. I think a lot of what we bring in our personal brand is not only what we're good at in our writing, but also it's just a reflection of our personal taste. Like, what do you like to watch? What do you like to read? For me, it's like I like action, but I like my action to be character driven. I like genre, but I can't just do straight genre with like 0 characters. So it's like I need fully fleshed out characters. I need a sense of humor. I don't like really gritty stuff that has 0 humor in it. So it's like I want, a sense of humor. I want, I'm a romantic at heart. So it's like I love stories. That would be your Receive story. That's the stuff that I watch. That's what I like. And so that's what I bring to the table as a writer. And I feel like the more that people can understand that about what a writer brings to the table, the easier time they can get past the, are you going to be a good fit for this? So it really meant a lot to me that, like, I took some I took a few generals, I think right after White Collar happened. I think they were kind of like left over from, because once the show really got into gear, I stopped taking meetings because it was working too hard. But I had a couple meetings in there. I can't remember why. But I told people, like, hey, I got a job in White Collar. And everybody that had read me and knew me and were a fan of me, they were all like, oh, that's a good fit. Like, they knew the show, they knew me as a writer, and that made sense in their head. And that meant that was like a good step for me. That was like people, the fact that it wasn't like an out-of-the-box thing, it just meant that that it was just the right path for me and a right move for me. And you know, and that's, I think, you know, at the executive level, at the network level, that's what they look for. Like, what's the right fit? You know, because nobody wants, you know, the guy who writes, you know, period romantic dramas all of a sudden be working on their fun, you know, con man FBI show. You know, and sometimes I think sometimes a person in a completely different genre can bring energy to a different genre, and I think sometimes that works out. But generally, they just want to know, is this person going to fit? Is this person going to be part of what we're trying to do? And I think making that decision as easy as possible for people is part of our job as being professional writers, is to help them understand how to hire us.
Well, and you mentioned something interesting along the way in both Killers and the other pilot that you were writing. You mentioned that because it was your thing, it just flowed. Like you said, you wrote them very quickly. They came out easy. Yeah. You were excited about it. That passion came across to people. I imagine that's all fitting along the same lines.
Absolutely, yeah. There's something about, I think you can't write for any other reason than it's something you're excited to do. If you write something because of the market, if you're chasing the market and you're trying to write something that's not authentic to yourself, even if it's a good career move, even if it's what everybody's buying right now, if it's not authentic to yourself, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to have, you know, a successful, you know, time writing it. You're not going to enjoy writing it. And I think at the end of the day, people aren't going to enjoy reading it. You know, I thought about it today. I'm like, wow, found footage is hot. People are selling them. There are guys that are selling multiple scripts in that. You know, I can be a fan of found footage or stuff that I like. I'm friends with all the guys who made the Blair Witch Project. Those guys are geniuses. They've started this incredible thing that's, you know, really evolved. And I'm like, I'm not the guy who writes that kind of stuff. And it's just like, that's just a market I'm just not in the mood to chase. Because even though sometimes I enjoy writing it, it's not where my heart is. It's not authentic to me. And I think it's really important. I think especially when you finally start breaking in as a professional, you want to work on everything. You want any jobs. Anytime anybody would call me in, I'd be like, I got to work on that. I got to pitch on that. Because it's just like, you're just so excited to have the opportunity to work. And I think Killers, honestly, because of that downtime a little bit after Killers and just the industry kind of contracting, it kind of forced me to go, you know what? I can afford to take a moment and only work on the stuff that really matters to me and really fits who I am as a writer and, you know, as an artist, and what am I going to bring to the table, and, you know, just to be very choosy about, you know, where I put my energy, because you only have so much time, you only have so much energy, you only have so many, you know, hours in the day, so you should put it towards the stuff that really means something to you and not the stuff that you think might get you a job or might sell. It's like, you know, it's about making those hard choices, but I think that's what defines us as professionals.
And you mentioned as well, tied to that, this idea of building fans, and that you're speaking primarily fans of your work, right? But how much would you say that things like social media are a part of that, or is this something different?
Well, let me differentiate. I think there's two types of fans. I mean, there is, yes, fans of your work. So there's fans, people that, you know, like my films, people that are fans of White Collar, who then like, oh, you're the new White Collar writer. You know, I've connected with a lot of White Collar fans over Twitter, which is amazing because they're a very, you know, they're just a very excited bunch, and they just, you know, they're really, you know, a huge part of the show's success, of course. But a lot of when I talk about fans, I talk about fans in the industry. And I think because, you know, in order to produce films and TV and to build fans as far as viewers and people that can get excited about, you know, watching what you do, you first have to build fans within the industry. And at that level, I'm talking executives, I'm talking producers, directors, people that become fans of what you do. Because, and this happened, I did an online chat recently. Somebody mentioned, I was talking about my story, and somebody was like really sad. I could just feel the sadness coming through the computer where they're like, so it really is a who you know kind of business. And that's a idea that I hear a lot, which is like the quote, it's who you know, and that people who say that generally feel that they don't know anybody. And so they feel like they're on the outside because they don't know anybody. And I'd like to get rid of the whole, it's a who you know business. Because there are plenty of people that go to parties and play poker and play basketball and meet people, and they just kind of schmooze their way to the top. And some of those people are extremely successful. Some of those people some of those people are extremely talented. Some, maybe not as much, but they have a great social game, and they're able to create, successful careers based on that. I'm not that kind of guy who meets a lot of people. I have like a group of friends, and I don't put it this way. I'm terrible at basketball. I'll leave it at that. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, like, instead of being like concerned about, oh, do I know enough people, and who do I know? It's like I'm building fans. So every time I take a general meeting, somebody's read something I've written, and they enjoyed it. And they want to get to know me. So I sit down with those people, and at the end of the meeting, if they like me and I like them, and we like what each other's companies do, then we can, talk later. The idea is that I've built a fan. And every time I write something, I want that person to read my new thing. And I want to keep in touch with that person, whether it's through email, through social media, going to Sundance. Honestly, I go to Sundance and I bump into lots of executives that I know there. And it's like just that way to kind of keep your face in front of them. And it's really about cultivating fans, because everybody starts out not knowing anybody. And if you write stuff that people like, if they meet you and you're a smart person and a nice person and you're easy to get along with, then they become a fan. And then over the course of years and, your career, then you know people. And so instead of thinking about, oh, I'm an insider, I know all these people now, it's not just cultivated fans, and they're friends too, but they're fans. They love what I do, but I'm fans of theirs too. And that gives me a basis to figure out, who do I want to work with? I'm only going to make X amount of movies in my career. Who are the execs I'm really excited to meet? One of the first, when I started taking all my studio general meetings very early in my career, one of the first executives I met was Ty Duncan, who was working for a big director at the time in the development staff, moved through multiple, jobs and ended up, working for producer Paul Schiff, who ended up producing There I Breathe. So Ty was an executive producer on my first film years after I met him.
Wow.
Ty was an early fan, and we got to make a movie together, which is awesome. And I think that's, to me, there's nothing schmoozy or crappy about that. There's just like, we were genuine fans of each other, and we waited, and we, worked hard and got to make a movie together. And that's, I feel, a positive thing with business. It's always just something that we should be nervous about or scared of or feel that we're on the outside of. It's like anybody can make fans. You just have to be a good writer and be a pleasant person to hang out with.
Well, and that brings up a great point. I know for me, I've got 175 TV credits now, and the older I get in this industry, the more it becomes about the people I want to work with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, did you say 175?
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we get, with television, it's not like feature films. Like, you can burn through a lot of them pretty quickly. But yeah, right. I mean, I've taken shows because of the show and not like the people that I was working with, and it becomes a grind. I can, when I choose a show because it's the people I like to work with, I have a blast.
Absolutely. And it's like, a casting director that I worked with back in Orlando, she used to teach workshops, and she would tell actors, it's like, by the time you get to callbacks, everybody at the callback can do the job. Then they're starting to think, well, of all these people, who do I want to hang out with for a day? Yeah. And that starts to really make sense when you as a writer, getting into the industry, especially in TV. Like in features, there's definitely some of that in features, but they spend a lot less time with your features because you're working at home and may or may not be on the set. It's a whole different world. TV, I mean, I just did my first job in TV, and it's, you know, there were many people interviewing for, you know, my position, and I sat down with Jeff Easton and on my, you know, my meeting with him, and I started kind of burning through my bio in the 5-minute version of it that I'd done a million times in a million generals, because I figured, I'm going to touch on the things they want to hear, and then we'll get into whatever else. And Jeff stopped me and said, wait a minute. Okay, now what movies were you watching in high school? And I was like, oh, okay, let's slow down.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing was Jeff and I just talked about our lives for an hour, about like what movies did we love growing up? What crazy paths did we take to end up where we were in that moment? And it was a really refreshing way to do it. But then I realized also it's like he was just seeing, am I going to fit in with the groove and the energy of the people that he has in the room? And once I started my job at White Collar, I'm like, Gino and I are collaborators. Gino directed the I Breathe. We're collaborators. You know, once a month we'd meet for like a day and sit in the room together and work, and we're really good friends. But like in White Collar, I'm like, I meet these people 8 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I'm like, wow, if I was annoying, they would be miserable. So like, I understood how important that moment was. It's like, not only can I do the job, not only am I a good writer and can I, you know, bring something to the table, can I pitch ideas in the room, but man, they're just going to spend hundreds of hours with me, and is it going to be a good fit? And that's, you know, I think one of the tough things of being a showrunner is figuring out the right, the right ingredients as far as personalities. And, you know, this, you know, my situation was just, you know, I was being added to a room where everybody already knew each other, already had a, you know, experience working together. And, you know, luckily I'm a nice guy. So I think I hit it off with everybody. And they're I can't imagine a nicer group, a nicer writer's room for my first experience. I mean, everybody there is really smart and really friendly and likes to laugh and also likes to work hard. So it's a great room, and hopefully I feel like it was a good addition to it.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think of, I just happened to be reading Stephanie Palmer's Good in a Room. And and one of the things that she talks about is that there's a whole bunch of myths in Hollywood. One of them is this elevator pitch thing. Mm-hmm. Where you're supposed to, if you're getting your hair done, you're supposed to have a 2-minute pitch or a 1-minute pitch of your thing, and when you get into a taxi cab, that you're supposed to be pitching to every single person. And what she says is that's just so weird. You don't know the person, they don't know you, you don't have any kind of rapport with them. Why on earth would they even want to work with you, even if it was a good idea? Yeah,
I think the thing to take from that, I think pitching complete strangers at every moment of the day, that you're right. I think that's not a great recipe for success. You know, I like Blake Snyder and his book. I'm a huge fan of Save the Cat, and Blake was a wonderful man and a great teacher. Mm-hmm. And you know, I prefer the way he talked about him. He would pitch, you know, strangers in line at Starbucks, you know, just to see if their eyes lit up, to see if whatever he was working on would connect with them. Mm-hmm. But what I take from that is, like, especially if you live in Los Angeles, everybody asks, what are you working on? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's your best friends you haven't seen in a while. Sometimes it's, you know, acquaintances or somebody you must bump into at a party. And the thing that I think is important to take away from that is you should be able to talk about what you're working on in a short, manageable amount of time. And if you do it enough, you'll start to understand that you can do that, and you can find out if your idea is working or not. Mm. Like when I was writing Killers, everybody I ran into, because they knew I Breathe was in post, like, what are you working on? And I told everybody. I had like a 30-second pitch. I didn't plan it. I didn't go, I would just talk about it in a succinct way, and it ended up being around 30 seconds, and I would kind of, you know, I would rewrite the pitch over time, but everybody I pitched it to kind of lit up at the end, and they'd be like, oh, that sounds cool. And it was sincere, and I realized from doing that I was onto something. And so now when I do it, and, you know, and all the time I'll meet, you know, aspiring writers, I'll meet people that work in the industry that are, you know, maybe work a certain type of job in show business and they're trying to break in as a writer. And they'll talk about a, you know, script they've been working on really hard for a long time, and they're just about ready to show it to agents, and they're really excited, and I'll go, awesome, what's it about? And their eyes will flare open, and they'll get really nervous.
Oh, and they'll go,
okay. It's about this guy, and wait, let me start over. Hang on. Okay. So 100 years ago, and I go, hang on. It's not a moment. It's not a do or die moment. It's not a holy crap moment. It should be easy because you should be excited about what you're working on, and you should be able to just kind of get to the heart of it pretty simply because you're writing it. And I feel like a lot of times I read scripts from writers who are working to get into the industry, and a lot of times when I ask them what their movie's about and they really can't tell me, then I'm like, well, your script's probably not ready, because they usually go hand in hand. Usually the best scripts you read, you ask the person, what's that about? And they go, oh man, it's about this. He does this, she does this, and then they have to learn this together. And you go, oh, you get it. You understand what your story is about. Then it's going to usually work on the page. So I feel they're kind of the same muscle in a sense.
Well, I think what you're describing and what Blake Snyder did is more like a development tool than trying to sell it. And I think absolutely Blake Snyder and the thing when he described how he did it, he was never trying to sell that pitch. He wasn't thinking that this person in the Starbucks would be putting this into production, but it was more a very respectful way. Hey, would you take 2 minutes to hear this and tell me what you think about it?
Right.
And which again, when you talk about sincerity, that's a very sincere thing that helps him develop his idea. As compared to, I think what a lot of people, and you see them at the conferences and that kind of thing, it becomes this very weird thing where they think that you are somehow going to take their idea and champion it and get it made, rather than it being this development and being excited about the idea.
Yeah. I mean, from that point of view, I mean, I've never felt that. Yeah, I pitched you like that make or break pitch in that moment in the elevator and the cab. Those moments generally don't change your life.
Mm-hmm.
What changes your life is lots of people reading your work, lots of people loving your work. I mean, I feel like a lot of people who want to, I'm not a big fan of the phrase breaking in, because it creates this image of there's this wall around Hollywood, and people need to break through the wall, and then they're inside the wall and everything's awesome. That's not the way Hollywood works. It's like there's, levels of executives from the brand new executive all the way up to the bosses, Jerry Bruckheimer, the guys who run the studios, all those guys. And the people at the very bottom of the ladder, all they want is to read great scripts. You go out, when you do your first round of general meetings, you'll realize, oh my God, these people are smart, they're excited, and they will get fired if they don't find a good script that hasn't already been bought by somebody else. So all they want is a good script. Now the problem is there's only so many hours in the day, so they can't read everything. So the systems that are in place, readers, the fact that they won't read scripts that aren't submitted by an agency, those systems are in place just to somehow, make it a manageable amount of material to get to. But it's like they want good scripts. They want you to walk in and make their day with a fantastic script. And if you've never sold a damn thing, if you're brand new and nobody's heard you, that's better, because then they get credit, or their boss gets credit. If the intern at Jerry Bruckheimer's script brings him the next Pirates of the Caribbean, then all of a sudden that intern is now an executive, and that intern's moving up. And that's so it's like we're kind of working together because they need us and we need them. But I just don't know how often that person's, working out on a treadmill and the person next to them on the other treadmill pitches an idea and they go, my God, that's amazing. You should send it to my office. It's just more about, so it's like that idea of like, oh my God, this is the one person that's going to change my career. And I had that feeling when I met my first couple of executives, and then I realized, oh, I need to meet 30 executives to find the 5 true fans that are going to really say, Bob, I'm a fan, man. I want your next script. I want to know what you're doing. And it's more of it's a numbers game, but it's also like that's a doable thing, because if you write good scripts, people are going to want to read them. I feel a lot of people that get shut down at the at the reader level, or they're not getting represented, their stuff's not getting sent on. They're getting shut down at that level. They feel like they're outside the wall and they can't get in. And a lot of times it's because they're not ready, because their scripts aren't good enough, because they're not They haven't written enough. They haven't learned enough about the business. I think people have an unrealistic expectation of how long it takes. And, I wrote, I wrote at least a dozen scripts before I wrote anything, I think I optioned my 8th script, and, Air Breeze was my 15th script or something. And it's
wow.
it takes a while. So people, they write that first script and go, how do I sell it? And I just go, write 4 more. Then you talk. And that's just, I think there's a lot of myths about how to get into the industry, quote, break in. There's a lot of myths. Some of it's true, and some of it's just the stories that are told, and amongst other writers that can't seem to, get a foot into the industry. And, I think it's important for, to talk about these things and figure out what's true and what's not. And I think, one of the things that's true is that they want scripts. They want scripts very, very badly. They want good scripts. But, it's just a matter of how do you get to them, and if your scripts, if they respond to them, if they're good enough for them to truly respond to them in the way you want. So I'm rambling, but very passionate about this thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's important to know, even when you have those 30 meetings and find those 5 fans of your work, they don't necessarily they have the ability to buy what you have right now. Those fans will help you perhaps with your next project, or they'll have their eyes open, their ear to the ground to look for things like White Collar coming up or that kind of thing.
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's I think you're right. That's an amazing point, which is everybody just wants to sell a script. They just want a person to go, oh, this is the script. We're going to buy it. We're going to make it. It just doesn't. It's so hard to get anything made. So it's stages. You need to make your fans. They need to, keep their, just like you said, they need to keep their ears open for stuff that's right for you. They need, sometimes you can develop scripts with executives, and it's about building a career, and it's there's multiple stages to it. It's just not like you get through a door and all of a sudden Hollywood opens up to you. There's just, there's many doors to get through, and each one has its own problems and its own challenges. But then, each one gets you a little closer to what we ultimately want, which is to get movies made, to work in television, to actually, work on a show where they're shooting episodes and it's going to be on television. It's that's the holy grail of what we want, and there's many, many steps to getting there. And those steps, that's how you become a good writer, is getting to those steps, working with notes, working with executives, working with the director, developing projects, developing pitches. How many pitches have I done that never went anywhere? Or, stuff like jobs I pitched for that I didn't get the job, or I did get the job and I wrote the script and the studio decided not to make it for whatever reason. Every time you do one of those, it's not a failure. It's just, I just learned something on this particular journey, and that helps you become a good writer. When you've been doing that for 10 years and you look back and you go, oh, I've written 30 scripts, I've pitched 50 movies. That just helps you be the writer that the professional writer that you are at a certain point.
Very, very cool. Well, we are going a bit long here, but I do want to talk about White Collar and being in the room for the first time. And tell me a little bit about what you learned about the room etiquette and your experience on that show.
I had my experience was different because they actually brought me in after the season had already started. So I literally walked into the room, met everybody, sat down on the couch. We had a ring of couches in the writer's room. Looked up at a board that was 2/3 finished, wow. And realized they're breaking act. I think they were in the middle of Act 4.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I've literally just been thrown in the pool. Luckily, I got some excellent advice from a friend of mine who's a very successful comedy writer and show creator in the half-hour world. But he gave me excellent advice, which was take your time. Nobody expects you to sit down the first day and start pitching ideas that are going to make the board. So I did a lot of listening, a lot of asking questions. I didn't understand things. You start to figure out very quickly that there's every show. You just kind of have that list of the way the show runs, the way things happen, and in White Collar, basically every act, there's either a con or a heist, not a big one, not like let's rob a bank, But there's like, we need a piece of information and we need to get it, and we're not the kind of show where we put the person in a, in the interrogation room and get the information from that. We usually trick people into giving us the information. So that's a beat, and almost every single act has a beat like that. And the writers would look at, the board, and they'd kind of go, we don't have a ton on Act 3. So they'd figure out a way to do that. And it's just, you start to learn the rules very quickly about how the show works, what are the mechanics of this particular show, in my instance, white collar. So the first few weeks, I was literally I was listening, and I pitch in ideas where I could, but it was about just understanding the mechanics of this show and what this show needs to run. And so as far as etiquette, it was a matter of being helpful where I could, but also not being afraid to just listen and learn. And then as the show progressed, we got busy, and all of a sudden writers would peel off to go work on scripts, and now the writers would go to New York to produce their episodes. And there was one week when it was me and 2 other writers, and breaking an episode with 3 writers is really hard. Wow. And those are the moments where I was like, you know what? Time to step up. These people are totally capable. They've been doing this way longer than me. They know what they're doing. But if I can just do whatever I can to help carry the load, even if I thought a bad idea that inspires their great idea, then I'm doing my job. And those are key moments where I felt like I was really starting to become part of the team, because I just stepped up and just, especially in those moments when all of a sudden there's just not enough of us in the room. We have to develop. We have to break story. And so I think it's kind of a gradual process to get to that point when all of a sudden you just, the work is coming fast and furious, and notes are coming and drafts are coming, and you just need to, keep pitching in as much as you can.
Very, very cool. Well, those are great tips, and we definitely have come to the end of our time here. But I really, really appreciate you giving so much wisdom, and I think definitely a lot of these myths, they perpetuate themselves, and they perpetuate in books and conferences and things like that, and people telling other people. It's nice to have a chance to debunk these myths, and hopefully they'll remain debunked.
Yeah, let's do some debunking. Let's do that. Let's all do that together.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, best of luck to you, Bob, and I'll send you an email when this podcast goes up.
All right, thanks, Gray.
Okay, bye-bye. Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for script writing information in print and on the web.